that has been key for me, that exploration of, okay, what belief system did I create as a kid that got me into this situation in the first place? And how do I repair and heal and change beliefs so that I can change my life? Because I remember at one point texting my sister and just saying, there's no hope. Like I just was hopeless. I had to get down to that rock bottom and then really search inside and be like, okay, what do I believe anymore? Like, do I believe that life can still be good? Do I believe that God is good? Do I believe that I can create a life that I love rather than one that I just suffer through?
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. In today's episode, I'm talking with Dawn Apuan, a copywriter and funnel strategist who helps entrepreneurs sell out their high-ticket offers with messaging that brilliantly captures their unique voice. But Dawn's journey to where she is today is a powerful story of learning to trust herself. After a life as a pastor in a tightly knit faith community where her path seemed completely mapped out, Dawn made the bold decision to leave that life behind and follow her intuition into the unknown. We talk about how she navigated that scary transition, leaned into her inner guidance, and ultimately found a life and career that light her up. This conversation is a testament to the power of trusting yourself. Let's get started. Dawn, it's really, really awesome to see you again. I love that you're one of the rare people I've had on this podcast who I did meet in person before meeting virtually. So it's great to see you again in this context. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited.
I'm really excited because you and I met at an event and we had a brief conversation. It was brief but deep. And I was like, I really want to know more about this person and her journey. So just to start us off, for this audience, what do you do and who do you help with the work you do?
Yeah, I am a copywriter. So I help a lot of entrepreneurs, coaches, course creators, and e-com brands, mainly in the health and wellness space, although I do have some random clients here and there that aren't health and wellness. And yeah, I help them grow their impact, their influence, and their income with copy that converts. Seen some amazing, amazing things. It still shocks me how much of a difference copy makes with things. And I've been at it for more than 5 years, but I'm still astounded when we tweak certain words or, rewrite copy altogether. I help a lot of entrepreneurs who are frustrated because they haven't been getting the results. They know they're able to make more. And with a little revamp of messaging and copy, the results are just phenomenal. So that is what I do. Everything from email marketing to sales pages, tiny offer funnels to 10 grand or more coaching programs. So that's where I like to play.
Amazing. I love it. I'm very interested in the work you do and the way you're describing it. It sounds like there's a little bit of magic in it.
100%.
Which I think we'll be getting into.
Yeah.
And so, when I meet other folks who are doing work that they're passionate about, that they feel called to, like I know you do, There's very often some kind of a personal transformation or pivotal experience that leads us to the work we're doing. I'm curious if that's true for you. And if so, what would you like to share about that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I have a pretty wild story. I
Yes,
often
I'm
say,
excited to hear it.
I often say entrepreneurship saved my life. Um, so I'll unpack kind of why I say that. So if we rewind, what is it now? It's about 7 years ago when I was, not looking at entrepreneurship at all. I didn't think I had an entrepreneur bone in my body. I worked full time for an organization, a nonprofit organization. I was executive director with my husband. We worked together, and that was sort of a life calling, if you will. We were pastors and nonprofit executive directors. I was full time plus, right? Like it's 24/7. And then I had my daughter, and that completely changed my life in the most amazing way possible. I joke about it now. I was so corporate girl focused, and, that recovering perfectionist, valedictorian, such a hard worker, that I thought, oh, I don't have time for kids. And eventually decided that I didn't want to go my whole life without that. And so I had my daughter, and it changed everything. It wasn't that I didn't want to be at work at all, but I wanted her part of my life. I didn't want to have somebody else raise her at a daycare. So which in the beginning was perfect because I just strapped her in and I would preach and I would teach and I would do everything with her, carrying her. And she came everywhere with me, and everybody loved her, of course. Everybody loves babies. So it worked out just fine. I worked from home when I needed to. I was in charge. My husband and I were in charge. So we had a lot of flexibility at that point in time. And then just after she turned a year old, we had a review of sorts by the regional leadership. And they told us that we were failing because our church wasn't big enough. And that was basically the gist of the message. It wasn't big enough. We weren't doing a good enough job, even though we were doing about 80,000 services in our community each year between hot meals, food bank, school supplies, Christmas gifts. I mean, we worked a lot. We only had 3 staff in addition to my husband and I, to do that much in our community. So
I'm just kind of floored. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just like, for that to be considered not enough. I mean, I don't know much more about the context of the work you were doing, but like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was pretty harsh. And I was shocked. I went into that review being like, I actually was feeling really good about myself. I'm like, man, I've had a baby for a year and I'm rocking it. I haven't been late on one report. I'm doing all the things. I hadn't really skipped a beat and was still able to be raising her in a way that I was really happy with. She was one of those like breastfed babies that never took a bottle. So she literally was with me for that first year. Right. And it was amazing. And so I was feeling really good about myself. And I literally felt like someone had punched me in the stomach because I was not expecting that at all. I was expecting to be really supported and be like, wow, you're doing an amazing job as a new mom and, still leading an organization that's doing a lot of good in the community. And to have it just be based on that one stat, right? Like number of people coming on a Sunday morning versus all the other things that we were doing. And I actually, I defended myself at first. I was like, well, we've done this and we've done this. And I started this program and I did this. And the leader looked at me, he crossed his arms and he shrugged his shoulders and he said, it doesn't matter.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just got like a contraction in my stomach. That energy feels so.
It was super harsh.
Yeah.
And that review, that was the beginning of about 6 hours that I spent with them that day. They came to the church, they came through all the facilities, they met with our board. So I had to smile all day long, knowing in the back of my mind that I'd already been told I was a failure. And it totally shook me. Because I thought I had been doing such a good job. So, and I still feel to this day that it wasn't accurate. So what happened after that, if we fast forward a couple of months, what they did as a result of that is they moved my husband and I. So they took that ministry, which is common within the organization to move pastors around. But we had extenuating circumstances with my husband had 3 kids from a previous marriage and we had half custody. So we really needed to stay local.
Wow. As a stepmom, that really pulls at my heart hearing that.
Yeah. So we had my little one plus 3 more who were still all in school, high school, middle school, and elementary.
Yeah.
We had a lot going on and not a lot of compassion for us. And I think had you asked anybody of our staff, our board, people in our church, they loved us. So we were very well loved by everybody except for this leader who made the decision. And that's like a whole another conversation of leaders and accountability and all of that. But ultimately they decided to move us, which resulted in us being moved further away, which caused not only did they then say, you have to put your daughter in childcare, we were driving more because we had to drive the kids to and from school every day. So we were driving on average almost 40 hours a week, just driving.
Wow.
That's not the 40 hours that we're supposed to be working.
Yeah.
Your
lives are really thrown into upheaval by this.
Yeah, completely. And you're super familiar with like nervous system and all of that. So not only did we go into this upheaval of like everything kind of taken away from us, and being told I had to put my daughter in childcare, I started having panic attacks.
Yeah.
Like literal panic attacks, visiting daycares because I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I was having trouble breathing. I was crying every day. My husband thought I was going to commit suicide. It was very dark, and I lost a brother to suicide.
Wow.
So, and it was actually, so my brother and I were 7 years apart, and it was 7 years after his death. And my daughter was the same age as his son when he took his life. So it was very synchronous in that my husband was terrified and he was like, I don't know what to do to help you. And I knew, right? Like I was very aware of that. And I knew that I would never do that to my daughter. I would never take my own life, but I was very depressed and just felt so helpless because they controlled everything and they took it all away.
I was just going to say the word control keeps coming to me through this part of the story. And the visual that comes to my mind is like someone else, some other entity, just like snatching control of all of these things that keep your life stable. And you mentioned like the nervous system stuff, panic attacks and all other sorts of mind-body symptoms. Such a primary trigger is like feeling like we're not in control.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Which also triggered childhood stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it was such an intense time. And so we went back to those same leaders because my husband was like, I don't know how to help you. I don't know what to do. Like I was crying every day and I couldn't find a daycare because I just couldn't and there were a lot of legit awful places, but yeah, I also had the mental health stuff going on. So we met with the leaders and essentially he laughed at me because he didn't understand. It was he and his wife. And they have 4 kids, but she had them all in daycare when they were younger. They were older by this time. So they laughed at me when I explained what was happening. And he just said, well, what would you possibly do if you didn't work for us?
What? As if there were no other options is the tone I got.
It's basically how you're treated. There is that you could do nothing else in the world but work
Wow.
for them. Like it's a whole culture that's
Yeah. And
very
I think many
controlling.
people, even if they're not familiar with this organization, are familiar with these dynamics, whether it's with a family
Mhm.
member who says, is anyone else going to love you the way I do? Whatever it is.
Right.
Like,
Any kind of abuser,
yeah.
right, would, or anybody that's had any kind of abuse of any kind would relate. And that actually was the trigger of why I sort of woke up. I mean, I woke up in that moment, like when he laughed at me and said, "What would you possibly do?" I say that was my Incredible Hulk moment. Like the
Oh,
sleeping giant woke up and I was like, "Oh no, he didn't." Like he did not
yeah.
just challenge me by saying, "What would I possibly do?" Because I knew that I was gifted and I could certainly find something other than the torture that I was enduring. And ironically, at the time when they moved us, we weren't in charge of a church anymore. We were working for a social service type thing. So my husband was working in a men's shelter downtown. And then I was working with women who fled domestic violence.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it was intense. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Women and their children
Yeah.
who had, experienced near fatal events, and we were hiding them. So
Mm.
I couldn't tell people where I worked, what address or anything. It was
Wow.
all
Yeah.
confidential shelters where I would go help these women. And as I got to know them and built these relationships and would help them with different things and provide spiritual care, because I was the chaplain, that was really what clued me into the fact that we were getting abused.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so poignant. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. The light bulb moment when I realized it, we were driving to a week long like spiritual retreat with everybody in the
Yeah.
organization. And I thought everything that they say when they describe their abusers, these men who had, beat them near to a pulp, I was like, everything they say about them is what I've said about the organization, about this particular leader,
Yeah.
about how we'd been treated through this situation. And it just really woke me up. And I said, I know I have to get out of here. Like, I have to get out of here. I have to rescue us, because we were very, it's basically like you sign a lifelong, it's not really a contract, but a commitment
Yeah.
to the organization. We did not own our house. We lived in a fully furnished house with cars provided, laptops, phones, like everything was
Mm.
provided for us. Our taxes were paid for us, and we
The
got a
golden
small cash
handcuffs.
allowance,
Yeah.
right? So it's very hard to leave. And
Yeah.
again, you're in this culture of you can't do anything else. And that's the vibe, even though like people wouldn't actually admit that normally. He did to
Yeah.
me, but it's definitely the culture of, you're here and we do everything for you and you're kind of stuck. And because you don't have any skills, real world skills,
Right.
to go
Yeah.
out and do something else with your life once you're into this organization. And it is really hard. I mean, we just to get first and last month's rent and enable us to get out, we had to have a substantial amount of money when, we were making about $2,700 cash total, us combined, working full time in a metropolitan area, which is one of the highest costs of living in the country
Yeah.
here. So yeah, I think, I look back and I'm like, we were facing phenomenal odds. And we actually just last week passed the 6-year mark of when we stepped out. So
Wow.
December 3rd is my freedom day.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
I I am like just getting waves and waves of chills hearing your story. And there's so much in it that is, you know, there's so much in it that is like, wow, this is such a different experience for me to hear about. I didn't grow up religious. So, that aspect is different from my experience. And at the same time, there's so many like keys in this story that are universal, that anyone can relate to. And something I found so compelling is how you said you had this like light bulb waking up moment from working with these other women, hearing their stories. Like you were in a position where you were the person they were talking to, right? Like they were divulging their stories to you. And while we all have such different circumstances, we're all such mirrors for each other. And there are these universal themes in human dynamics. When we get to see it externalized in someone else's story, it's like, whoa, suddenly I'm able to zoom out from my own story and get a different perspective on what's going on here.
100%. And it was a shocking wake up, right?
Yeah.
To be like, wow, the mirror, just like you said, people mirror us and you don't realize. I think we also tolerate so much,
Yeah.
sadly, right? So many of us, whether, and my situation might be kind of extreme, but, what you tolerate in a romantic relationship, or what you tolerate with your kids, or what you tolerate at work, or
Yeah.
from your parents. There's so many situations where I think we just tolerate a lot of garbage, instead of
Absolutely.
being awake to the amazing, incredible human being that each of us are, and how much better we should be treated.
One of the kind of like reflective, like, not that this is a new thought for me, but it was like a deepening or a new way of seeing it, a light bulb was, as you said, like this is an extreme version of these dynamics. But I was like, this is so similar to working in a corporate job. Prior to doing the work I do now, I used to work in television. And, there was a bit of this kind of like golden handcuffs idea there too, where it was like the money was good, the work for a while anyway was consistent. That industry has changed a lot. But anyway, it's a whole nother story. But there was this idea like, well, I'd hear people say, well, I hate this work, but what else am I going to do? What else am I skilled to do? And there's such I think this is very relevant to other places our conversation is going to go. There's such a kind of normalized or accepted worldview in this country, I don't know about other countries, that like having a corporate job is what is quote unquote safe. And that's how you can get your healthcare paid for. And like going out on your own is dangerous and it's impossible. And like you can't possibly do that.
Yes. Well, and imagine, and I always say, we talk a lot about that in corporate,
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs, they're like, often the languaging is, be free, and let go of the safety and security, which, I think 2020 showed us a different story with that. But and I said, I always used to say, that's sort of like middle of the road languaging of, corporate. I was like way over here in a situation where everything was provided for me. So do you want to talk about
Yeah.
safety and security? When I didn't have to pay for mortgage or lights or power or internet, or, all of those things were just given to me.
Yeah.
And as I got into groups and talking with more people as entrepreneurs, I was like, you have no idea what, like, the difference of the meaning of freedom to me
Yeah.
coming from that is almost, and it's interesting because I still have a lot of friends in the organization. I still attend the church. So we're
Yeah.
still very much.
Oh, wow. You still even attend a church like within that organization?
Yes.
Okay. That's
Yes.
super
We're
interesting.
still, yes, it's very fascinating. So I'm very careful
Yeah.
about how I talk about my experience, although I have often said, I analogize it to prison,
Mm.
and our great escape, getting out of it and just realizing, like, I would never give up my freedom again.
Hmm.
My freedom is too valuable, but I didn't see it
Yeah.
back then. It was safety and security, and it was a paycheck, amazing healthcare, um, there's a lot of things that were nice. And I think that, like you said, golden handcuffs, that's truly what it is, whether it's a situation that was rather extreme like mine, or even corporate, because we think that we can't make it on our own financially or otherwise, to do our own thing and to just be free rather than be stuck in a job. I read one time, I think actually while I was, making my great escape, and planning and trying to figure out what I would do. I read that like 84% of Americans hate their jobs.
Yeah.
That's
It's
a
so sad.
significant amount. And, you you had shared, in pivoting and looking at trusting ourselves. I think that's a big component, is that people don't trust themselves. All of our safety and
Yeah.
security is wrapped up in a paycheck or what seems normal, comfortable, dependable,
Yes.
rather than trusting ourselves to do something different. And, I had to trust myself. I had to bet on myself that I would win, right? In
Yeah.
order to get out of that organization, it took a phenomenal amount of effort to do it.
So this is such a great lead in to the next place I'd love to go in this conversation, which is like, what are the specific tools, techniques, concepts, personal experiences that were most instrumental for you in developing self-trust, especially coming out of an experience like that one, and to develop self-trust to a point where you're doing something that, like we're saying, a lot of people are too afraid to do, which is go out on your own as an entrepreneur. I'm also very curious about the level of self-trust it takes to retain what you want to retain from that community while separating yourself from the dynamics that were not good for you.
Mhm.
And we could take this piece by piece, but I'm also curious about how that development of self-trust then feeds into the work you do with clients. Are there things that you sort of teach them through working with them that you've learned that have, yeah, the tools and techniques that have helped you to develop this self-trust?
Ooh, so much there.
Yeah, sorry if that's like too much all at once.
Yeah. So some of it, just to give context for, like, because some people think we're crazy, my husband and I, that we're still involved in the church now. A lot of that has to do with the fact that he was in it since birth. Like, he
Yeah.
was raised in the church. And I mean, so was I, but just a different denomination. He worked for them for 25 years.
Mm.
So when we walked out, um, it was very significant. I looked at it actually, sort of like, if you're familiar with Shawshank Redemption, and people who are lifers in
Mm.
prison, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden they get their freedom,
Yes.
and almost all of them end up taking their life because they can't function in society. They don't know how to exercise their freedom.
It's such a severe change in like
Change.
identity and sense of reality.
Mhm.
I think it's very destabilizing.
Exactly. And that process is sort of what I threw my husband into, since I was the
Mhm.
one that demanded that we leave. It was
Yeah.
not him. Not that he was happy in it, but he was too scared. And
Yeah.
I think entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. It can be.
um,
It is.
and and he had a lot more years. I had only been in it for 7 years. So he had almost 25 when we stepped out. So very big difference in him. All of a sudden, he had never had to buy a car. He had never had to sign up for power or gas or a mortgage, like never bought a house.
Yeah.
And, here's like mid 40s. So, um, it was a pretty radical shift for him to make, and sort of tag along and trust me. And I always say, like, I'm always so grateful that he trusted me, but it is a lot even for me to then trust myself and know that this other human and our 4 kids, we're all trusting this bet I was making on myself, to continue to provide for our family. So there's that component of also, needing to support him and guide him and help him with mental health through all of this, and something that he really mourned because he felt like it was his life calling. And it's all he's done since, when we left, he had basically left his parents' house to become a pastor and had spent 25 years doing it. So
And
we
this kind of
certainly.
sorry.
Hmm?
I was just going to say, and this kind of a shift, it's not just oh, I'm going to change my ideas about something. It's like, it's physical, it's emotional,
Our
it's
whole
your
identity
attachment system, your identity, it's everything, right?
is all of our friends. I mean, some people, not
Yeah.
everyone. Again, we're still connected, but there are people who wouldn't speak to us anymore because we left. And we always joke, we're like, oh, well, that's the day we lost our salvation because we left
Yeah.
ministry. And, we joke about it, but I think there's still grief for him
Yeah.
because he felt like that was God's call. And um, he just was never treated like I feel like he should have been treated within it and honored. And, he's an extremely gifted pastor and teacher. And I still think that God has big plans for him, but we're still in a season of figuring that out. To go from just that all-inclusive type life, and you have a spouse and kids. So it's not just about trusting me, right? Like I did have to step into trusting me, but I also had all these humans that were counting on me as well. And there's a lot to carry. There were some days, I won't sugarcoat it. It's super hard. I cried a lot.
Yeah.
But that, for me, and not everybody has faith in God, and they might say, faith in the universe or source or whatever, a higher power. For me, it is my faith in God. And I say that my relationship and my faith really grew far more in the last 6 years than ever as a pastor, because I was forced to. Forced to grow, forced to connect to God, forced to get quiet, forced to trust myself, forced to do the inner work, forced to do that hard introspection, right? That most people really are afraid of. That's why most people, I think, don't get silent. We stay busy to cope with life. And that's one of my MOs too. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm just sitting here meditating all the time, but it's a discipline, and I have to discipline myself to do it because people used to call me like the Energizer Bunny. Like if you're familiar with human design, I'm a generator. I go, go, go. I do, do, do. I create a lot. So it's having to quiet myself and connect has been hard work for me, to be honest. But it is the game changer. Like if you want to change your life, you have to change your mindset. You have to change your thoughts, which then influence and your beliefs, which are even, more deeply rooted than your thoughts. So that has been key for me, that exploration of, okay, what belief system did I create as a kid that got me into this situation in the first place? And how do I repair and heal and change beliefs so that I can change my life? Because I remember at one point texting my sister and just saying, there's no hope. Like I just was hopeless, which of course terrified her after having lost our brother. So, I had to get down to that rock bottom and then really search inside and be like, okay, what do I believe anymore? Like, do I believe that life can still be good? Do I believe that God is good? Do I believe that I can create a life that I love rather than one that I just suffer through?
Yeah.
And that was a lot of the work, and discovering how to trust myself was just that quiet time. Lots of books, lots of meditations, a few key phrases. Like I remember I didn't know anything about personal development before becoming an entrepreneur. And I laugh I was very technologically challenged. I still used a flip phone. I didn't have a smartphone at the time, and my husband laughed at me when
Oh,
I actually started the business secretly. I didn't tell him until a while in. And when I did finally tell him that I was building an online business, he laughed and he was like, "But you don't even know how to turn on the TV." Like, how do you
so
do this?
funny.
And here I was at this point, I had learned to build funnels. I was running Facebook ads. I
Wow.
was
Wow.
doing all this crazy stuff that most people don't know how to do on the internet, make money with funnels. And I mean, most people don't even know what a funnel is, but
Yeah, I think a lot of listeners won't even know what that is. It's a marketing tool.
it's a marketing tool. It's how you make
Yeah,
money online, really. And
yeah,
I had no idea, but I learned it because I was so determined.
yeah,
And I think that is something that speaks to people in my story. It's like I wasn't gifted in this at all. Like literally, I was a pastor girl that had a flip phone. I didn't even have a smartphone. Okay. So I got one. um, but, just to be able to learn whatever it was that I needed to learn and always being willing to up level internally, to
yeah.
face my demons, to face the fear and do it anyways, to
Mm,
learn whatever skill it was that I needed to learn, whatever software it was, to just not give up at any step because no step was easy.
yeah. Or
But
comfortable, I would imagine.
oh, not at all. But I had the vision, right? I had this vision of getting out, of freeing myself and my family to live a life that I wanted to live where I could raise my daughter and not miss
Yeah.
all those first moments with her, not miss that time. And, if we fast forward, I was getting kind of a long into my story, but if we fast forward, people now are like, oh, you have the most amazing kid and you're so lucky. I'm like, I gave up everything for this kid, which I would do in a heartbeat, but it's not luck. Like I
Yeah.
also put a lot of time and energy and effort because we did walk away from ministry so that I could be home with her and raise her. It's not an accident to have well-behaved, super compassionate, smart human beings, which this world needs. Um, yeah. So I think that try to think back to all the questions you asked, trusting
Yeah.
myself and building that up with that connection time. One other thing I wanted to mention, my husband and I at one point saw Jordan Peterson. He's a big Jordan Peterson fan.
I
And
don't know who that is actually.
he is a psychologist in Toronto
Okay.
and very brilliant intellectual thinker in regards to human psychology and just like how we live our best life. A lot of his
Yeah.
stuff is about anxiety and depression and the human potential, really. And he's not necessarily faith based, but we saw him. He had visited our city and he said one thing that just like I've never forgotten. He said, success is atonement. And, obviously as believers, atonement means something different for us. But he said the root of that word is at one mint, right? Like if you
Hmm.
break that down, at one mint or at one with, and becoming one with yourself. And for me, I would add on one with God, which is the Christian definition of the atonement and Jesus Christ's sacrifice. But this idea of success being at one with ourselves, it wasn't grounded in money, which I was so focused on for so long of rescuing my family and making money and proving this leader wrong that I
Yeah.
could do something amazing and provide for my family without them. And, proving goes back to childhood as a trauma from childhood. So it's to then go on this journey throughout entrepreneurship of how do I become more one with myself and
Mm,
one with my creator. And you talk about trust, and that's how you get to trust is you know yourself. You take that time to be with yourself, which most people are scared of.
yes.
And that's the beauty of discovering what's in alignment. If you don't know who you are and what you want, and then to start living in integrity with that and keeping your word to yourself, not just your word to other people. That's been a big part of the journey as well, because that's how you build trust, right?
Yeah.
You make a promise and you keep your word. But yeah, I mean, it's been a wild journey. So many ups and downs and pieces.
Yeah. A lot of intensity.
Yes.
I'm so grateful to get to learn a bit more of your story. I'm grateful to have this conversation for the listeners of this podcast. One of the things I've like so many reflections. I've been taking notes here, and one thing that I was like, I'm so glad that the listeners are having this opportunity to hear about how, like, you felt you needed to leave this organization, but it wasn't as simple as that. It wasn't like a clean cut, and it couldn't be because things are complicated. Your partner, your husband, has important ties to this community. And I think that's true for most people who find at some point that they've got to disengage from a system that is harming them, that it's like, not only is it not easy to walk away, sometimes it would be actually more harmful to completely cut ties. Like, it's just each circumstance and each person's experience is different, and the path forward needs to be tailored to really work for you. And, if you're a family, work for the family. Like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. There can be a unique solution that also continues to evolve over time.
Yeah. And I think over time is a key there too. I was going to
Yeah.
say, it didn't happen overnight. It took
Yeah.
me 16 months before I could get us completely out and able to leave the ministry. So again, if listeners are, wanting or dreaming of getting out of a situation, it's maybe not quitting tomorrow and then taking the leap and hoping that it appears. Like, I took my time so that I wished, I prayed every day that it would happen faster. But I do believe everything unfolded just how it had to. So that when the time was right, everything fell into place in a matter of 2 weeks. Once it was time, it just, we got the one perfect house in the zip code it had to be in, that allowed dogs. Like, it was so specific, and just the cars that we were able to get, the jobs, and, just that everything fell into place. And trusting, again, we come back to trust, not only ourselves, but also the universe and God. And I don't know who said it, but I remember hearing, there's a couple of phrases that I really clung to during that season because it was so hard. One of them was, everything always happens for my highest good in divine timing. And I would scream that through tears. I would whisper it under my breath, walking through the halls at work and being like, just over and over, trusting, okay, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in divine timing. I'm going to trust and be at peace that this is going to work out. I'm going to get out of this literal hell, is what it felt like. And then also, someone said, don't despise the bridge that gets you from where you are to where you want to be.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because it's so easy to just be angry or upset about our current situation, right? But I looked at it as, okay, again, another phrase is, everything happens for me, not to me. So I looked at the situation and I was like, okay, this is going to be for me. And what steps can I take? What can I be doing to eventually cross this bridge and get to the other side? But not despising it in the process. And a lot of forgiveness work in there too, with the people and the circumstances that I went through. But again, just this idea that it's not going to be overnight. Nobody's an overnight success. It does take time. So if listeners are thinking like, man, I've been at this, however long months, if you're trying to escape something or change your life, you do have to trust that it will happen in the time. And there's a level of not just trust, but belief. And that's something I talk about a lot in my messaging and when I preach. I still get asked to preach occasionally, but is that we still have to have a level of belief. I think most people don't actually believe they can change their life.
Yeah,
And that's what keeps us stuck.
that's
Not
so
only do we
true.
not trust ourselves, but we
Yeah.
don't trust or believe, have a real faith. Like faith is believing before you see it, not
Yeah.
seeing, then believing.
It's so true. And it's understandable, and it's reinforced by the messaging that we're given, that most people don't believe that that we have the power to change our lives. And there's a couple other, just for me, high notes of the story you told. One was about the tool of getting quiet. There's so many different ways we can do that through journaling, meditation, etc. But it's kind of this paradox where when we are in an emergency, if we want to move through and beyond that emergency in a way that is within our choice, and like you said, for our highest good, we can't let the emergency run the show, which is such a really, really hard thing to do, because when you're in an emergency, you just feel like you're going to be carried away, but you really do need to get quiet in the middle of a storm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the other thing you said you had your incredible Hulk moment. I was like, I so identify with the way that you phrased that. And I can think of a few different incredible Hulk feeling moments in my own life and I've seen this in other people too, where I sort of just genuinely surprised by the strength that came out of me in that moment, the drive, the words, the actions. It's like, I didn't know I had that inside of me. I didn't necessarily believe that I had the to do or say that, but it's there, actually.
Yeah, I believe there's a sleeping giant in all of us.
I love that. Yes.
And sometimes it just takes getting poked enough
Yeah.
times or hard enough to wake up that sleeping giant.
I mean, that describes what it has felt like to me in those moments in my life. Gosh, there's so many other areas I want to ask you about and talk about, but I want to ask you something very specific that's on my mind, which is, when you're working with clients, you're obviously infusing this theme of self-trust into the work that you do with them. And something that occurred to me was you're helping folks with marketing, you're writing marketing materials, and marketing is about influence. And many people, yourself included, from what we've heard, have had experiences of influence being harmful, like influence having the flavor of manipulation. How do you help clients who are scared to assert their influence because they're worried it's going to take the form of manipulation? Is that something that comes up with your clientele?
I love this question. Yeah, they would phrase it as selling without sounding salesy is
Yeah.
probably the most common thing I hear. Which salesy isn't actually a word, but we all know what it means,
We
right?
know
And
what it is.
nobody
Yeah.
wants to feel like poor used car salesman. They have a bad rap, but nobody wants to feel like that, right? And a lot of my clients have expressed something along those lines. And, for me, it's part of why I do what I do, because I feel like those are the people who need help the most, because they are genuinely good-hearted people that are scared to market themselves or talk about it in a way that is influential to get people to buy, when really, if you're selling a solution that helps people live a better life or fix a problem they have,
Or helps them develop the faith that they can change their lives, like we're talking about.
yeah, we should be shouting that from the rooftops, right? And, excited to share, but people are so scared of that manipulation or that used car salesman, or, the online space can be pretty gross these days. And, there's a lot of lies too, unfortunately. a lot. I think that's been one of the most shocking things and heart-wrenching, really, in this journey of clients and working with different people, is just all the lies I've encountered. So it makes me more passionate to use my voice and to help the good-hearted ones who really are honest. Those are the ones that, we should be highlighting and helping be more successful, because they are actually telling the truth. It's just that sometimes what we see and what we hear are the ones that have more money, or, not that everybody who is doing well in the online space is disingenuine, but um, yeah, there's a lot of non-truths that you see online these days.
There are a lot of manipulative tactics being used. That exists.
There are, in how you close, in how you just the truth of, I actually let go of a couple clients who in their social media were saying things like that they were making 7 figures and blah, blah, blah. And they were making a fraction of that.
Wow.
I had access
mistruth, untruth. Yeah.
We're talking making 200 grand versus saying they're making 7 figures, and hire me because I'm a 7-figure coach and this or that, or and it's not an isolated case. I have a lot of them.
Sadly, that doesn't surprise me at all.
It surprised me. I don't know, I think I just tend to trust people more than I should, but that's the thing, is if you're worried about it, right? People who are worried about being salesy or worried about being manipulative, they probably aren't. And
you're probably going in the other extreme.
And it's people need you. That's one of the things with helping, supporting people who are in health and wellness, is with why I've been so passionate about it, is they're the best kept secret in an industry that's controlled by big pharma and government, I think, that has a lot of lies. And we've seen, especially in the last 5 years, a shift in, I think more people are realizing a breakdown of, big pharma and the truths behind that. But these holistic wellness practitioners who are using other methods of health, really tapping into our own bodies and the wisdom our bodies have, rather than drugs. And you're super familiar with it, right?
Nurturing self-trust.
Yes. And, I've supported a ton of clients in the last couple of years in this niche, because I'm people need to know this. It's not only fascinating. Our bodies are brilliant. And I think we abuse them a lot with just over medicating and, all sorts of things. It's a whole nother conversation, but, just this passion of, I want to help the people who really are doing good work in the world, get their voices out there and solve problems. I often say, if you had the cure for cancer, would you feel bad talking to people about it? Or would you be out there sharing hey, there's a different way? It's all of us would be out there trying to get everybody to listen. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's the same way with people that I write for now. It's I want to help you because you are making a difference in the world. And I often say, I'm picky about who I write for. I only write for people who are transforming the world in some way, whether it's helping people with chronic pain, chronic migraines, or reversing MS, or, there's so many things and brilliant people out there, but people just don't know about them because they're not sharing online, and they're not, they're afraid of being manipulative or having haters, or, people wanting to cancel them because they dare say that, medication isn't the answer, or things like that. So that's where I get really passionate, and I bring in, I certainly do have a lot of the, I say copywriting is a science and an art. And I have to say, copy and woo, I combine the science and the woo, the spiritual side of bringing it together, because it is so important energetically what we infuse into the messaging. It isn't just the words, it is also the energy behind what we're saying. So, a lot of my clients, I think, they get a lot more than they originally bargained for, because I do end up coaching, or like one of them early on was like, "You're
I
like
can tell.
Yoda." She's like, "I thought I was hiring a copywriter, but I hired Yoda." um,
I got such a light bulb of clarity hearing you speak just now. And what I wrote down was like, if a health practitioner, if a health practitioner's goal is to help their clients develop self-trust, like if we want to nurture self-trust, then we have to model self-trust. And the impression I get is that the work that you, Dawn, are doing with these practitioners is that you are nurturing their self-trust, that their message is, is aligned and that they can speak it with confidence. And so as they speak their marketing message with more self-trust, it becomes part of the work that they're doing, part of what they're modeling and helping their clients with too.
yeah, exactly. Confidence is huge. I tell all of them, it's confidence that sells. Like, people buy confidence, people buy results.
Yeah. And I think even that word confidence has gotten some like negative boogaboo attached to it, because it's like the word con, like con man, confidence man. Um, Certainly confidence can be used to manipulate or to harm. But it can also be used for good, just like anything, just like relationships can be used to manipulate or to harm, or they can be used to nurture and, love. And relationships can be the most beautiful thing we experience in life.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We are coming soon to the close of this conversation. I'm getting so much out of it. So grateful to have this chat with you. If there is a soapbox message that you're personally most passionate about spreading through the work that you do, what would that message be?
Oh, there are so many I could share. I think, even just thinking back to our conversation, I think it's this idea of the ability to change our life when we choose it. When we choose to change our mindset, we can change our life. You really can do anything. You really can.
That is such an inspiring message. I'm going to hold on to that message because it really lights me up. And my follow-up question is, for listeners who are hearing that message threaded throughout this whole conversation, and they're maybe at the very early stages of even considering making a change in their life, they hear your message, they feel both inspired by it and also overwhelmed, like, oh, like, ugh, where do I even begin? What words of encouragement would you offer that person?
Beautiful. I think if you're listening today and you've, heard my story and maybe thought of your current situation and or dreams, maybe dreams that you've set aside for a lot of years, and you want to revive them and actually change your current circumstances and start somewhere, just start small. Like, you don't have to quit your job and join a monastery and meditate for 16 hours a day, right? You have to take one small step each day, maybe a few small steps. Something that comes to mind, not to give a plug for my book, but it is sitting there.
Please do. Please do give a plug for your book.
Is this idea of how to allow God's blessings in your life, or, over higher power you believe in. But it's that just everyday process. It's daily. It's not like you do one thing and the rest of your life is just fine. It's keeping on taking the steps. And I'll share this one last story. So when early on in my personal development journey, I went to this personal development week-long camp conference type thing, where we did high rope stuff, and I climbed a 37-foot pole. I'm kind of scared of heights, and it's just a telephone pole and you have to stand on the top at the end. And I was completely terrified because the pole is, like the size of my feet. And in order to get onto the top, you have to let go with your hands. There's physically no way. And I'm like sweating talking about it. There's physically no way to get on the top and to stand on the top without letting go. And what an incredible life lesson that is. But part of that process was one step at a time. Like I would grab one ring, and they were like tiny, like one finger could go as I'm climbing this pole. One step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. And that's sometimes how life is. And you can do anything when you just take it one step at a time. It's when we look at, the full Mount Everest in front of us, or if I looked up at the pole or looked down, by the time I got to the top, I froze at the top, and the coach on the ground was yelling at me, and he was like, choose and move, choose and move, choose and move, which has become a mantra of mine. And so I finally made that choice. I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I put my all into getting on top of that pole. And I have a video of it, and I'm shaking the whole pole because of how much my body was shaking. I got on top, and I'm standing there, and the whole pole is shaking because I was shaking so bad.
Wow.
But I was only able to do it because I just one hand grip at a time, one foot grip at a time. And that's what the journey is just one moment at a time. So take a few moments. I often will put my hand to my heart and just tune into myself, throughout the day, to do deep breaths. Again, it doesn't have to be some long meditations time. It's those little moments. It's that shift in thinking, in that shift in belief of, when you hear those negative thoughts of this is impossible or hopeless, it's like, no, what if I chose to see things differently? What if I chose to believe? What if it went better than I ever imagined? That's another thing. We what if very negatives in our mind, but what if we flipped that to being positives? It so much comes down to just taking the little steps, being willing to see things differently, being willing to shift, being willing to pause, even for a few moments, to take deep breaths in, to ground ourselves. And so much we underestimate, how much really can change in a short amount of time. People are always shocked when they're like, you only left 6 years ago? Like, you've been able to build and do all of this in 6 years. And for me, I'm like, oh, well, I have so much more. I can't believe I'm only here where I am, because I want to be way further along. And, I could beat myself up. And sometimes I do, I'll admit. And then I have to call myself back. It's a journey, right? I'm not perfect. I still have hard days. But that's when you can reflect and look back and be like, oh my gosh, I've really come a long ways. It can happen fast, even if in the moments it doesn't feel fast. You just continue moment by moment, choosing to shift, choose to see it differently, take that step, grab that next rung in faith, that next step of the journey. And before you know it, you will be on top of that pole.
Dawn, thank you so much for including that story. I'm going to take that with me for a long, long time. It's just such a visceral metaphor for growth. And what I love is that, you described to us in detail, you weren't able to do that thing that to me sounds utterly terrifying, climbing the pole and standing on it. You weren't able to do it because you weren't terrified. You were terrified. And you're describing to us the way to move through the terror that we all feel in, at different moments in our lives. But that there is a way to move through if we want to move forward, and it's worth it.
Yes, please do move forward. To those listening, the world needs you.
Choose and move. I love
Choose
that.
And move.
Love that. So grounding. I'm so happy to get to have this conversation with you. Where can folks find you, learn more about you, find your book? And if they want to work with you, what can they reach out to you for?
Yeah, I play the most on Instagram. So Dawn.Copyqueen. And then that's my same handle other places too, LinkedIn, but mostly I post on Instagram. So I'd love to hear from you, what your takeaways are from the episode. I always love hearing from people on, what meant the most to them. So come say hi inside Instagram, and I'd love to chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for spending this time, for being so generous with your story and your words of encouragement and inspiration. I'm so glad that we've met each other, and I look forward to staying in touch.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing, and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.